we now have Shri Kapil Sibal ji, Senior Advocate, speaking first. Kapil Sibal ji, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mahesh. It's really a great privilege to be to this kickoff to the inaugural address, I hope, in a series of annual events that will happen in the honor of and in the memory of your father. When I think of Ram, I think of a man of many parts. His forensic abilities, his affable disposition, his love for life and literature, and most important of all, his ability to stand alone were some of his great qualities. He was passionate about free speech, but he also saw its pitfalls when applying it in the context of constitutionally protected freedoms. He believed in the rule of law and not in the rule of diktats by men. This is a subject that was very, very close to his heart. And I start off by quoting him when in 2010 he said, "Of late, media acts as a court, passes judgment even before the court pronounces its verdict. Trial by media is nothing but breach of law. It amounts to contempt of the court." I'm also reminded of the words of the Mahatma when he said, and I quote, "The press is called the fourth estate. It is definitely a power, but to misuse that power is criminal." Now, we're talking about the pros and cons of trial by media in a very different context because the nature of the medium has changed. In the new media, technology plays a very great role in terms of its reach and its influence, and I'm talking in the context of mainstream media. That influence is both constructive and destructive. And when we come to the social media, we move through a jungle of words and images. The social media provides space for believers and non-believers. We hear wise voices and the destructive voices of demolition squads. We don't know what is true and what is fake. No one knows better. These platforms provide choices, but in that terrain, it is difficult to make a choice. All communication mediums and all technology have the potential of both, that is both beneficial and is liable to misuse. But the contours of that use must be clearly defined and demarcated. There's always a Lakshman Rekha to be drawn in respect of all human activity. History of the world has shown that no society is bereft of crime and of criminals. And it is the rich and the powerful who often perpetrate crimes, murder, rape, molestation, financial frauds, corporate frauds, and other things, other crimes, whether they are in government or outside government. And the job of the fourth estate is to unearth executive excesses and corruption. And of course, criminal activity protected by the state, apart from unearthing criminal activity in society. And the media, whatever its form, is an indispensable tool to ensure, one, detection of crime, two, expose protection of criminals by the rich and the powerful, three, unearth facts and bring them in the public domain, four, build pressure that investigation is commenced and further expose attempts by agencies to protect the accused. Now, there are three stages of a trial. It starts with discovery of facts, which we call an investigation. It ends up in a charge sheet, and ultimately, pursuant to a trial and a conviction. Now, at the stage of investigation, at the stage of discovery of facts, the media should, according to me, have a free hand, but limited to discovery only. Opinions are a matter relating to assimilation of facts, leading to prima facie inferences and later conclusions. And the media has done yeoman's service to society in several cases. I can remember the Ruchika Gerotra case, when a 14-year-old girl was molested. Ultimately, she committed suicide because of the trauma of systematic harassment. And after a complaint in particular, finally the accused was convicted after 19 years. And it was the role of the media that led to that conviction. We had the Jessica Lal case. We had the Priyadarshini Mattu case, when an ACP harassed a law student, and then the victim was raped. The accused was first acquitted, and the media brought fresh evidence, which ultimately led to his conviction for life. We have the Nitish Katara case, the Nirbhaya case, and the Bijal Joshi case. But the problem that arises is that the media now looks upon these discovery of facts as a way of earning TRPs, to gain more audience. They bother less about credibility of source. They instead try to sensationalize the event, even if it takes distortion of facts. And the fact of the matter is that the media can make a hero turn into a villain in no time at all because of its enormous power. And media verdicts are sometimes overshadowed by court decisions. And with the entry of social media platforms, the situation has nosedived further. Today, the media has incarnated itself into a public court. The rule of presumption of innocence and guilt beyond reasonable doubt has been thrown to the wayside. The new media presumes guilt, and the victim must prove his or her innocence. The standard of reasonable doubt is substituted by the presumption of guilt without any benchmark standards. An American author once said, and I quote, "A fair trial is one in which the rules of evidence are honored, the accused has competent counsel, and the judge enforces the proper courtroom procedure. A trial in which every assumption can be challenged." But in the new media, the rules of evidence have no place. I don't think the media has any concept of what evidence is in law. It has no idea of what constitutes an investigation. But at the time when the crime is yet to be discovered, I think the media has an important role to play. But when the second stage comes, there's a stage of a formal process of investigation, then the agencies of the law are obliged to investigate all the facts, both in the public domain and those discovered in the course of its formal investigation. At this stage, the media's role is to abstain from ascribing guilt to any individual. That is disruptive of the rule of law. I remember the famous 2G case, and many of my colleagues here are aware of how the sensationalism in the 2G case led to the decline of the sector itself. A report of the CNAG led to a court rendering a verdict at the level of the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court really became a court of first instance, and presumed guilt, subject, of course, to the trial that was to take place. The result was the trial acquitted all the accused. And in the meantime, so much damage was done to the telecom sector that today a sector which was then live and kicking, which was earning profits, which was providing efficient service, is today under a debt of almost 5,000 crores. So I believe that at the stage of investigation, the media should not be allowed to deliver verdicts lest it influences the processes of law. Now, what really happens in this process when the trial goes on in public spaces, in social media platforms, is that judges are human beings and they're liable to be influenced by what is happening outside the court. And this also happened in several cases that I can talk about. Recently, we had the Sunanda Pushkar case, we had the Kathua gang rape case, where the media, in fact, pronounced some of the accused as innocent. Now, while the investigation is in process and a parallel trial is going on in the media, that in fact also influences the investigators. And we've seen it happening recently in Bombay with respect to certain people in Bollywood being now persecuted and prosecuted by agencies. I think that that is contrary to the rule of law. When it comes to the third stage, that is the stage when the charge sheet is filed, I have seen media, in fact, carrying on a diatribe against the accused, even while the charge sheet stands filed and the trial is on. Recently, and I must share this with you, that in the Sunanda Pushkar case, what happened was that there is a charge sheet filed, there is an offense that is registered for abetment of suicide, and a particular channel has gone on in the media, in the mainstream media, to say that I will give you evidence of murder. Now, how do you expect a court to deal with this issue? How does the mainstream media describe facts that may be tainted as evidence and wish the accused who is being prosecuted, allegedly prosecuted because the charge is not yet framed, for abetment to suicide, to be charged for murder? What happens in that process is that the opinion within society through social media platforms and through mainstream media convicts the individual who ultimately may be acquitted, but he has in the process lost his entire reputation. And there is nobody to compensate that individual for that reputation. But apart from that, I think there are far more serious apprehensions that I have in respect to the nature of investigation and the role of the media in the course of that investigation. The problem really is that most of the mainstream media houses are controlled by business people who have deep economic interests in society. And in that process, they willy-nilly tend to do the bidding of the government. And there comes the danger to the very process of a criminal trial, because what happens is that the investigating agencies who are already in tandem with the government and work with the government, because they, according to me, lost their independence in the last 6 years, and that's my belief. The investigating agencies are already working in tandem with the government. And therefore, the mainstream media platforms are used for certain purposes which have nothing to do with the rule of law. And we've seen that happen time and again. And we are seeing it happening in Bombay as I talk, because there's a Bihar election that is going on. There is a government in Maharashtra, and certain channels in the mainstream media are playing to the tune of the government. Now, what does that do to the victims of such prosecutions and persecutions? So business entities must withdraw. If you want an independent media platform, and if you don't want, media trial by media, we need to ensure that a new structure is put in place through which business entities and commercial interests are disengaged from institutions that disseminate news. And unless we do that, this pattern will continue, and there will be no hope. In fact, the Press Council of India has set up journalistic norms which are being violated on a day-to-day basis. Principle 1, observe accuracy. No inaccurate, graceless, baseless, misleading and distorted material to be published. And we see that happening on mainstream television on a daily basis. Principle 8, media not to elevate conjecture, speculation, or comment as statement of fact. Principle 12, editors' duty to see all views are given equal prominence. None of this is happening, either in the print media or in the mainstream media. Of course, the social media is an animal in itself. Then we have the Cable Television Network Regulation Act. Even under that act and under the rules under that act, they are not to air defamatory, deliberate, false, suggestive innuendos and half-truths. Have you seen that happening on mainstream television? It happens all the time. Most of what is said and most of the debates that are going on are defamatory. Many of them are based on false facts. They are not just suggest innuendos, they make direct allegations. And many of them, in fact, incite violence. And they are not, under the rules, allowed to put any material on air which will disturb the law and order. Section 19 and 20 of the television network says there should be no communal agenda that will result in disharmony and encourage feelings of hatred and ill will and enmity. But we see that happening all the time. And all this amounts to contempt of court. I remember Ramnath Goenka ji. He realized that the media business must be a standalone business. And therefore, what he did was that he invested in several real estate projects throughout the country. And the money that he got from those projects were used for running the Indian Express. Because unless the media becomes a standalone business, which is uninfluenced by both political pressure and through the investigating agencies, I don't think that we'll be able to save this country from the nosedive that rule of law has taken. We live in an era where mediocrity dominates. We have to select excellence when it comes to news on mainstream platforms. And excellence will only come about if there is independence of those platforms. That is a tall order. I fear and I grieve that unless we take care of this, the rule of law will not just be damaged, but courts of law will start believing more in what's happening outside court than the dispensation of justice within court. Thank you very much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.